Yo, YouTube, back once again. Uh, Sorry I didn't get a chance to post a video yesterday. I had some things I had to take care of. But I said, let me start off early. I had the luxury of being off work today. And I said, you know what, let me touch on these things. But first and foremost, my last video when I was doing my top 10, I said, let me put this right now. When I was talking about the top 10 groups, hip hop, I forgot to add Bone Thugs and Harmony. I was tripping. I got Bone Thugs at number five. You could take De La Soul off the list and bump everybody else down a notch. Yeah, number five was Bone Thugs and Harmony. I was lunching, man. Yeah, I'm not gonna talk on that too much. I just know, like, I remember like back when they first came out. You know what I mean? Me and it was like, I had a couple of friends of mine. We used to rap different verses and stuff like that. And like, I used to rap. I used to always do Lazy Bones verse. You know what I mean? Like just on some flashback stuff. But anyway, I wanted to touch on that first and foremost. But this is more or less you know when they say kicking knowledge. But some things that people will find very interesting. When I was in school, my favorite subject was history. That was always my favorite subject. Like I was good in it, read it, picked it up quick. Um, but as I got older, doing my own research and things like that, I'm saying, oh, okay, they don't really teach you accurately everything that happened in school. You know, they kind of more or less indoctrinate. That's why I don't trip, and especially when people gas up. And I'm not trying to knock people. There's nothing wrong with furthering your education. But I'm not gonna gas up people. Oh, I got this degree. I got that degree. That's a meaningless piece of paper. You've been indoctrinated with a certain subject from a certain particular people's perspective. That's it. But if you do your independent research, reading various books, and me, I told you, I always go back to the Bible. That don't mean like it's. I don't read other books. I do, but I always go back to that. But this, it's not going to be too preachy or nothing like that. But the first thing I wanted to touch on, I know when all the continents, when they were formed together, when the Earth was first formed, they called it Pangea. If you look, especially if you look with South America and Africa, you see it's like a perfect fit when you connect it. It's like a puzzle. Like Europe, North America, you could literally push everything together. Which is why my belief system, why I believe in you know biblically the flood and things that happened that separated the continents and the people and stuff like that. But I'm gonna touch on the first thing that was important to me. Like, and that's why I got like the little Redskins hat on. Yeah, that's my team. I'm gonna touch on that too. I'm gonna say I'm not gonna go into too much detail because I'm gonna say that for when I talk about sports again. The only thing I'll say is that it's ironic that um, this country they pushed Native Americans. All of them looked a certain way. All of them looked. They had this Asiatic look to them, this yellowish reddish hue. They looked Asiatic. That's not true. That was on the West Coast. That was on the West Coast. On the East Coast, if you know about the different tribes and stuff like that, the Seminoles and stuff like that. And I know I get a lot of like, well, I got Indian in my family, but I literally have Native American in my family. I wish I had that picture, man. Like we have a family Bible, and like I remember my mother showed me a picture of my grandmother, and she looked like a female version of this Redskins logo. You know what I mean? Like my family like has like Seminole in it, you know. And what they don't want to tell you is that the people on the East Coast, tribes that were on the East Coast, yeah, they were quote unquote black. You see how dark this complexion is on this logo? That's not red, you know. They don't want to talk about that when they had the Mohawks and stuff like that. They want to act like everybody looked Asiatic. No, the ones on the West Coast did. Because, like I said, when everything was formed together, if you notice, California is on the outside of China, Japan, Korea, so they had that certain look. The best kept secret is that, quote unquote, all us African Americans, we were already here. Like I said before, if you do the research of the buoyancy of boats and stuff like that, it was virtually impossible to transport that many people on boats from Africa over here and have them in large numbers, with slavery. Everything was based on some tribal stuff and wars and stuff like that. And, the people who were slaves, they were sold. They were sold for a certain amount, a certain amount of profit. And that's why, like I said before, a lot of black folks say, I got Indian in my family now. The best kept secret is, majority of black folk that in this country we're Native Americans. They don't want to tell you that. They don't want to tell you that because that is going to cause too much of a catastrophicism as far as, the natives, they got their own land, they got their own casinos and stuff like that. If they actually broke it down and really did history and they would see that they really owe us more than, what they want to talk about. They want to act like we all came from Africa and we all were enslaved, and it's like I said, it's no disrespect to my African brothers and sisters. It's not, because we're all related. So we are definitely connected to them. They're like our cousins. That's why some of them, like I was watching a little program earlier, like why some, I say some because I do have African friends myself. I'm not trying to demonize them. But why some of them, they come over to this country and they have this level of elitism to where they're superior to us. Because we're calling ourselves African American when they're like, oh, I'm literally African and I'm in America. I know exactly where I come from, and I'm here. So I have more of a claim to this than you do. Not knowing that our ancestors have been here for centuries and have put in work, blood, sweat, and tears for this. And like I said, it's not to demonize America. Like I said, come on, people ask me who you are. I'm an American, period. That's it. I don't do, that racial stuff. You want to call me black, whatever, that's fine. I'll chat. As a black man, I got the little, the Cuban tat on my arm. That's from my mother's side of the family. It's people over in Cuba that are way darker than me. Way darker than me. In Puerto Rico, islands. And that's another thing, like how they separate, like they're called, they're like, this is how much I know. When they talk about Hispanics and Latinos, Hispanics come from the islands. Puerto Rican, Hispanics. Dominican Republic, Hispanics. Cuban, Hispanics. Mexico, El Salvador, Latino. People have to know the difference. There's a difference between the two. And it's a level of prejudice within their community as well. You see the things that's going on with the migrants and stuff like that. I'm going to touch on that a little bit, but I just wanted to touch on, level of history. And like I said, it's a level of conspiracy behind that, because like when you don't know who you are, where you come from, you have a less of a value in yourself. Like when you talk, the only time white folk call themselves white is when they talk to us as quote unquote black folk. When they talk to other white folk and they talk to other groups, oh yeah, I'm Czechoslovakian, I'm from Sweden, I'm German. They know exactly where they come from. I'm Italian. Us, we call ourselves black. Black is a shade. But again, like I said the other day, read Song of Solomon chapter 1, 5, and 6. Read the scriptures. Read Acts chapter 7 and verse 6. I got it open right now. Like I said, I'm not going to preach too much, don't worry. But the only verse I'm going to talk about is, like I said, Acts chapter 7, verse 6. It's a hidden gem in the Bible. And God spake on this wise, that his seed should sojourn in a strange land, and that they should bring them into bondage and then treat them evil 400 years. Yeah, that sounds like modern day American slavery. If you go back and look at the time frame, how long that quote unquote blacks in this country were enslaved, it kind of matches up. And there's no disrespect to other groups of people, stuff like that. But if you talk about the Holocaust and stuff like that, the Holocaust was not 400 years. I know what was. That's why I always go back to the scriptures as a reference. You know, the research is there, not to mention, you know, for people who are from the DMV, or if you travel to the DC and stuff like that, check out the Natural History Museum. There's a statue in the back of that museum. It's like a statue of a face. And they call it, the statue of that tribe, they were called the Olmecs. But if you look at the features of that statue on that face, they have black, quote unquote, Afrocentric features. If you look at the nose and you look at the cheekbones and stuff like that, like they have like Afrocentric features. But the Olmecs were a tribe that was in America. That's what I said. Check out the Natural History Museum. Look it up. Google it. Olmecs. Olmecs. Look it up. You look at them totem poles and stuff like that. You see the faces and stuff like that with the animals and stuff like that. Look at the features of some of them faces. Like I said, they want to act like Native Americans, it was this monolithic group and they all had this Asiatic red look. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. They didn't. You know? And just to touch briefly on, like, you know, the whole redskin controversy. I'm not going to talk about, you know, the places I used to work, but it was a place that I used to work at. And they used to have the Native Americans come over there from like around November. They had this little festival or something like that. And the garments, they had the little, you know, the stuff that they wore tribal. And the lady I saw, you know, I talked to her, she had an Asiatic look to her and stuff like that. She had the little deer skin things on and stuff like that. And I asked her, this was back in probably 2012. And this is around the first time they started having controversy about the Redskins name and stuff like that. And I asked her, I said, how do y'all feel about that name, Redskins? You know, how do y'all feel? And she told me, she was like, she said, baby, she said, us, if you look at our skin, we're a shade of brown. We're a lighter brown. We're kind of like your shade or a little bit lighter. We're not red. That term, redskin, that was literally almost, they looked at it like an elite group, like when they went to battle. That red skin, that red was from the blood that was on their skin from battle. They looked at them like the Native American version of the Marines. So they saw it with a sense of pride. Not to mention that I believe, I didn't do too much research, but I know a little bit, like the face that's on the hat, like it's based off an actual chief. So it's not some mockery and none of that other stuff. That's some insecure crap that they literally are trying to program people to have a certain way of thinking. Y'all that had no issues when they was winning Super Bowls in 82 and 87 and 91. All of a sudden, 2016 get here, and these liberal Bamas, these weak Bamas, they want to say, oh, this is so offensive. Now, I know what they called them. They called them prairie niggas. That's what they called them. Forgive me for my terminology. That's what they called them. They didn't call them Redskins. I know because I talked to Native Americans and she told me this. They never saw it as derogatory. They never saw the logo as derogatory. They never saw the name as derogatory. That's to make a certain elite group feel more comfortable in the things they could do, where they could go around and change things. You know, but like I said, I'm going to go back to the boats and slavery, you know, in this country. Now, you know, they act like they just took all these black folk from Africa, put them on boats, and they brought them over here. Now, the best kept secret, we were already here. Difference is we know how to coexist. You know, it was more, you know, people, Afrocentric or black tribes on the East Coast. And those were more Asiatic tribes on the West Coast. Because all these continents were connected. Called Pangea. You can look it up. Like I said, you know, and even when, quote unquote, Christopher Columbus, when he was sailing, you know, the seven seas and, you know, quote unquote, but, you know, when he landed, I believe he landed over around the Dominican Republic, I believe that's where he landed at, in Haiti. And, you know, they called it the West Indies initially because they were trying to get to India. They didn't know this land existed. So they thought they could leave from Spain, you know, and they can get over to India. He was actually trying to get to India. That's why they called it the West Indies when they found out this is a whole different land. Then they seen the darker hue of the people there, so they called it the West Indies. They were looking for spices. You know, like I said, the best kept secret, we were already here. And shout out to the Haitians too. Like I said, I love all my people. And there's no disrespect to the white folk either. It's not. Like all of this is tribal. All of this is tribal. But I take pride in who I am and my people and stuff like that. That's what I say, yo, stop calling yourself African American. We're not African American. We're not from Africa. We were already here. We're Americans. We're Native Americans. We're the Native Americans. Oh, yeah, it's the promised land they talked about. I told you, I could break it down. Yeah, because like I said, I've read the scriptures, also done, you know, research. You know, this is the information age. So you can get a lot of this. You can get a lot of this stuff like from the internet. It's right there if you dare to search it. You know, if you dare to look for it, it's right there for you. You know, I've done it. Like I said, I had the luxury of being off work today, so I had some time to, you know, research some things. And I've done this previously. Like I told you, my favorite subject in school was history. And like I told you, the only time white folk call themselves white is when they talk to black folk. That's when, oh yeah, this is the white guy. No, they know where they come from. They know their family, or whatever. Or I'm German, or we're from Switzerland, or we're from Ireland, or we're English, or we're Italian. And even with the Italians, ironically, because I got well, it just went on, but I had the God the Father Part 2 on my TV. You know, why the Italians had that darker hue? Look up the Moors. You know, when Hannibal was going through Europe, riding them elephants, and they conquered Europe, certain parts of Europe, they have a darker hue for a reason. That's why it's funny. A lot of them is not to go against Italians or nothing like that, because people are people and individuals are individuals, but I'm just speaking from a historical standpoint. A lot of them, they do not like black men, but they love black women. It's like something within them, like, you know, because, you know, when Hannibal was going through Europe and he conquered Europe, you know, with some intermixing, you know, interracial things going on. If you notice, they have a darker hue to them. You know, hair is naturally black. They have like an olive skin tone to them. Yeah, over the years, they kind of, you know, they kind of try to get back to more of a Caucasoid look. You know, and like I say, there's no, because like I said, look, God created all of us. God created all of us. With that said, I'm gonna break it down in the scriptures, because like I said, there's a reason why, like, I was a part of a church and I'm no longer a part of that church. I'm a grown man. I don't need instructions from someone that's been indoctrinated from the 60s. When I can do my own research. When the head of the man is Christ. When I need this information, I can just pray to God and he will guide me where to look and stuff, and the information is right there. When they talk about, you know, in the Bible with the story of Noah and his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and they would talk about, you know, the story of Ham and the Canaanites, and his son was Canaan. And they basically, I remember going to a Christian school when I was young, for like 1 year, and I remember them telling me that black skin was a curse. Black skin was a curse. When that's far from the truth, like I said, all you gotta do is look. When they say God created Adam from the dust, created him from the dirt of the ground. Look down and you tell me what color the ground is. What color is the dirt? And like I said again, I'm not trying to demonize, you know, Caucasians or white folk, because like I said, you have white sand as well. But it's way more brown dirt out here. Way more. That's why a majority of people on this planet have a brownish skin tone to them. But they want to use this terminology in America. They want to call us minorities. I hate that term. Minority. Like, really? Minority to who? To who? Because I mentioned, you know, what Christ looked like. What color his skin was. They said it in the scriptures. You know, I'm not speaking it from my own personal standpoint. I always use, like I said, I always use the Bible as a reference because then it's like, okay, you can't sit there and be like, oh, that, excuse me, you using that as an excuse or defense. Nah, I'm not. I'm not. I go back to the scriptures. That's the ultimate reference. When they talk about such and such begat such, if you read the Old Testament and they talk about such and such begat such and such, I think it was the book of Leviticus when they talk about the different tribes and stuff like that. And it basically that's our history. They want to act like black folk history started from freaking slavery. It didn't. And it was more broader than Egypt as well. You know about it, they wanted to just go back to Egypt, and it's like I said, there's no disrespect because the Egyptians were special, but at the same time, they turned their backs against God. You know why certain things were allowed to happen to them? Why God allowed certain things to happen to His people? Because they initially turned their backs against Him. They talk about that in Romans chapter 1, where they, matter of fact, I'll read that real quick. Because like I said, I'm just using as a reference. I'm not even in preaching mode. I'm gonna save that for Sunday, but it is a particular verse because I was talking about Native Americans with the totem poles, and if you look at Egyptian, when you see the sphinxes with the lion's face, and I'm sorry, with the lion's body and the man's face and stuff like that. Where is it at? Romans chapter 1 and verse. I'll start with verse 22. Romans chapter 1, verse 22. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Verse 23. And changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. Look at the Sphinx, how they was worshiping all these animals and stuff like that. Like, nah, God put us above the animals. You don't worship creatures and stuff like that. Well, you don't. You literally are going by what you see instead of what you don't see. The human eye is not made to see all of this. This is a corruptible flesh. It's not made to last forever. We're not made to live forever. You know, but yeah, the reason why I brought that up is because, like I said, you look at the totem poles where they had the birds and the eagle. There's nothing wrong with nature, being wrong with nature and things like that. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you start literally putting them to a point where you're elevating them to where you're worshiping them, yeah, that's wrong. You know, so this is why you wonder, how did we get to this point? Why did God allow these things to happen? Man got lifted up in pride and so caught up, you know, in the things that he saw. And you know, like I said, with the Egyptians, you had the little the lion body with the man and stuff like that. Like I get it. Like I did my research with that. Like I know that they believe that cats basically they could see spirits, you know, and they help defend. And there's a little bit of truth to that, you know. So I don't want to act like everything is untrue. There's a little bit of truth to that, you know. But you know, God had an order to this. Again, I've said it many times. You know, and people, like I said, everybody gets caught up with what they see. But you know what? I said I wanted to touch on a few things. Like you see, I got the little Tupac joint, the little shirt. Like I said, I want to touch on like because this all ties into history and stuff like that too. Like I know what people don't know was Tupac Amaru Shakur. Tupac Amaru was actually he was a chief. I can't remember if it was the Mayans. It might have been the Mayans, but I know it was South. He was a South American chief. You know, that's where they got that name from. You know, but also from the conspiracy aspect. You know, I go back, I kick some out, and the reason why I can bring this up, like I said, we live in the information age, and it's right there for you if you do the research. And like as far as to this day, even like certain people they make a mockery of it. Who killed Tupac and who killed Biggie and all this other stuff. Like if you do enough research, you'll see. Like it's deeper than what people think. They wanted to make it seem like it was just some straight hip hop stuff. But both Tupac and Big, neither one of them they wished death on another. They wanted that top spot. Yes. You know, I know Pac wanted to humble Biggie, you know, because he felt like he was too big for his britches on some arrogant stuff. You know, Big, you know, felt like, you know, this dude's not gonna embarrass me. I'm gonna show him I'm the illest MC. But with that said, you know, it's I know with Pac, his family, and I can't speak on this too much in depth because of you know, the things that I do for a living, what I do for a living. But only thing I'll say is that his family had political ties from before he was born. And the way that people communicate with each other, the way people, the upper level elite people communicate with each other, they practice numerology. You know, meaning they communicate through certain numbers and stuff like that. Reason why I bring that up, and I touched this on one of my shorts. Check out my YouTube shorts too. Some of them are funny, some of them are educational. But one of my YouTube shorts, I touched on that. You know, his last album, you know, was Machiavelli the Don, the Illuminati, the 7-Day Theory. Tupac was shot on September the 6th, 96. He died on Friday the 13th, 96. When they were stomping out Orlando Anderson in that casino, if you notice, if you look at the videos, he had a number 13 jersey. It was a Dan Marino jersey. He was in the hospital for 7 days. He died. His time of death was recorded at 4:03 in the afternoon. 4 and 3 is 7. The 7-Day Theory. Like I said, the answers are there. It's not. They wanted to make it seem like it was some hip hop stuff, but it goes far more deeper than that. The greatest power on this earth. The greatest power on this earth is influence. And if you're at a point where you're influencing people outside of the norm, then that becomes a problem. Look, I'm kicking some real stuff to y'all right now. I'm kicking some real stuff to y'all right now. But like I've said many times, at the end of this day, I put it all out there. Mamba mentality. I laid it all on the line. So you add it up. Like I said, he was shot on the 6th, he died on the 13th. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 7. 4, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7. Machiavelli the Don, the Illuminati, the 7-Day Theory. 7. God's number of completion. God made the heavens and the earth. He did that, and on the 7th day, he rested. See, these people, like I said, they make a mockery of these things. You know, and like I said, with Biggie, it's unfortunate because I think his arrogance kind of got him the way he was at. Meaning, I believe he had some shows that he was scheduled to do in I think it was Europe, United Kingdom, England, something like that. But he decided to. I know he was influenced by Puff too. That's why certain things happen. I know he was influenced by Puff to travel to promote the Life After Death album. You look at the cover of his album. You can't play with these things. You can't. First album, Ready to Die. Second album, Life After Death. The cover of his album, he's standing in front of a hearse. You remember the last image of Biggie going through New York? He was going through in a hearse. Remember that? March 9th, 1997. I know that he did a song, Long Kiss Goodnight. And they can say what they want. You don't disrespect the dead. He dissed Tupac after Tupac was no longer here in the physical form. You listen to that song, Long Kiss Goodnight. He had a couple of lyrics. When I believe, I'm trying to remember how it went, but he was saying that he said, as I leave my competition, respirator style. As I leave my competition, respirator style. Climb the ladder of success, escalator style. With your spirit above me or beneath me, your whole life you live sneaky. And he was dissing Pac. When Pac dissed him, at least when Pac dissed him, they were both here in the physical form. Although that song hit him up when I first heard that joint, I was like, this is something different. This is something different. It's like no Vaseline and nothing else. Like this is real personal. I never heard somebody like just straight like cursing people out at the end of the track like that. That mess was venomous. So I'm not glorifying that either. Tupac should have called that man on the phone and just talked to him. That was his little brother up and you toss some head out like men. But you gotta remember these dudes was 25 and 24. They were still young at the time. So it was a level of immaturity with that as well. But Biggie's last interview on the West Coast, he did that Long Kiss Goodnight freestyle. I believe it was on Sway and it was on Sway. It was Sway and Flex. I forgot the name of the dude, Sway and somebody, but it was the Sway show. You could look it up. I believe it's still on YouTube, where he was basically doing Long Kiss Goodnight, dissing him right there in California, right in his backyard. And them people, they took it personal. Like I said, I'm not glorifying nothing. I'm not. Because both them brothers should be here. Both of them should be here. But, Pac was the threat. Biggie wasn't the threat. Pac was the threat. So Biggie getting eliminated, they wanted to make it look like something that it wasn't, that it was hip hop related, when it was much deeper than that. Much, much deeper than that. But it instilled a level of fear into the people to where they could just go back to just doing normal songs. So they wouldn't be influential. Like I said, currently you see, certain things going on. Like I said, in the media right now, they talk about, the Epstein case and things like that. It's so many things going on. That's why the irony of it, I'll say this much. I'm going to take a sip for this. The irony of it, this is how you know it's deeper than what you think it is. Trump is in office right now, President Trump. And like I said, I honor whoever's in office, no matter who I vote for. Even though I do lean conservative, more to the red side. But no matter who it is, I honor, that, because it's not the person, it's the office that they hold. With that said, politicians, they go back and forth and they try to, air each other out anytime they have opportunity. If you notice, the Trump administration, they kind of fumbled this whole Epstein thing. This is like a golden opportunity for the Democrats to capitalize on it. Speak on it. About to do it. There's no one saying anything. No one's saying nothing. Obama's not saying anything. Hillary Clinton's not saying anything. Biden's not saying anything. I don't know how much he can say. But to me, that speaks volumes, the way it's silence on both sides. That in itself should tell you something. That's why the title of this episode is what it is. Not that I'm a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but as time goes on, there's a lot of truth to it. The reason why I say that, because all you gotta do is research. If you go back to 1999, um, the United States admitted that they had a part in the death of Martin Luther King. The government admitted that. Bill Clinton apologized for it. Like I said, I'm not going to go into details. It's already out there. Other people have spoken on this. I'm just sharing it with, with the people who are on my page who are listening. Like I said, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share. Don't forget to turn on your notifications for when I go live. People don't get a chance to see this live because I know I'm doing this earlier. I hope you check out this video later on because I'm doing my best to spit facts right now. Like the U.S. government admitted they had a part in the death of Martin Luther King. They admitted it. I'm not sharing something that's top. No one is top secret, or I'm not supposed to say. It's already been said. Same thing with the death of Malcolm X, and how a lot of when quote unquote the black people of this country were really united in the 60s, and they were starting to unify and come together. They had COINTELPRO, and they tried to infiltrate a lot of these groups, whether it be the Nation of Islam, or the Black Panthers, with certain black folk that were paid off, that were agents and informants, to create chaos and to tear these groups down, to destroy them. Like I said, these things, they're out there, if you do your research. Like I said, and it all ties in together. Why? Because all of it is his story. His story. That's the irony of that word, man. And again, I'm not trying to, create a racial divide, because even, heck, what's going on with in Europe right now with Ukraine and with Russia, that's what you call white on white crime. So you have a lot of that stuff. I remember Bosnia in the 90s, when Yugoslavia separated into Croatia and Serbia. So all of this is tribal. I bring that up. It's like, from a hip hop standpoint, like if you look, each style in each region is different. Like you could tell somebody's from the East Coast, it's more of a wordplay, lyrical, somewhat. We speak a little faster and stuff like that. Go to the South, is a little bit slower. It's a little drawl. It's a little, distinct accents, with Creole or Texas accent, or even Florida. Go to the West Coast, they have their own lingo. Their style is like kind of laid back. It kind of reflects the weather. East Coast, like I said, is a little more hardcore because you got the concrete, what they call it, the concrete jungle. You got more colder weather. I bring this up because if you look at all the factions, it's all tribal. It's all tribal. All of it. No matter which group of people you talk about, is tribal. I can give you another example. You can look at, the Indians in India. All of them are not the same. They have a brown hue too. Skin, a lot of them are much darker than me. But some of them are Hindu. Some of them are Sheikh. That's Seikh. I believe I'm pronouncing it right. Sheikh. The ones that wear the turbans, they call them sheikhs, or sheiks. You got some that are Muslim. Like I said, that's all tribal. Everything is breaking down tribal. When they went over to the continent of Africa, when they tried to introduce colonialism, and they try to infiltrate a lot of the different countries. Like I said, I have, some, coworkers of mine that's from the motherland, and, I have some friends of mine that's from there, some mentors of mine that are from there. Africa is very tribal. You'll say one country like Liberia or Nigeria, or Ghana. You go over there, it's like probably 100 to 200 different dialects. It's not a universal language like that because they break everything down from a tribal standpoint. That's how humanity is historically. Everything is breaking down from a tribal standpoint. The source of all that is family. That's the basis of all that. Like I said, not to get too in depth or nothing like that. I just wanted to, break down some real stuff. Like I said, I talk about everything up here. And I'm not the end all, be all, know it all. The information is out there. We live in the information age. All of it's out there. I always use the Bible as my reference, though. For that, like I said, the answers are right there. The answers are right there. It was one more thing I wanted to touch on. I do remember that. Remember that movie came out a couple of years ago called The Black Messiah? I remember, was it J. Edgar Hoover? I believe he's the head of the FBI, and he was like, when they infiltrated the Black Panthers, they was trying to, prevent a Black Messiah. The irony of all that is, the Messiah is already Black. That's the irony of it. You read the Bible, and when they describe him, like I said, there's no slight to anything else. But the last thing I bring, reason why I was so, that's what I forgot to mention earlier when they talked about Noah, and I was in church, and they said black skin was a curse, and his youngest son was Ham, and he was talking about the different races. First of all, the way the preachers are preaching in the wrong. Reason why I say that, because all you got to do is match things up scientifically. Match up scientifically and historically and spiritually. Scientifically, it was already proved that the oldest bones were discovered in Africa. That humanity started over there. You already know what the people look like over there. So if humanity started over there, how is Noah's youngest son the only black one? That's some superiority type crap. That's indoctrination. This is what the previous generation, no disrespect, I respect my elders, but I'm a grown man now. I'm not a little kid. I've done my own research. If they want to be stuck with the fear that was indoctrinated within them from the 60s, let them do that. Me, I'm going to seek out the truth. And like I said, I go from different elements, and I take all the sources and add them up to see if they all come to the same common ground. So if the oldest bones were discovered in Africa, and in the Bible, God said he created man from the dust and the dirt of the earth, how's that the only black one is Noah's youngest son? And then that was the curse. That's deeper than that. That's why I said I add all of this up. And I'm just trying to help people see the truth. Yeah, it says that in the scriptures too. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. These are things I pray about. I mean, me and my brother talked about that like years ago. And we used to say, oh, you know what? At the end of the day, I just want to know the truth. That's it. No one likes being lied to. No one likes being lied to. It's like I said, do your research. Don't take my word for it. Research it for yourself. All this stuff that they talk about from an historical standpoint. Use the Bible. Use science. Use the history that they gave you. And then, see if all these things add up. Because these are the things that we have to teach our children and to share with each other, especially as men. Because we are supposed to be the leaders in this. And even for the women. Because the women are, the helpmeets. As men, we might miss something. The women might pick it up, say, oh no, you know what? I saw this. This is what this says. You know, we're supposed to help each other with that. Like I said, at the end of the day, I'm just doing my part. I could go on and on with this like all day. I really can, man, because I told you that's like my favorite subject. But like I said before, man, you know, a lot of these professors and you know these people in these universities, they think they have all the answers. When, like I said in the scriptures, Romans chapter 1, verse 22, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. All these people got to be accountable at the end of the day. I know my heart's in the right place. I thank you all for your time.